start trying to fool around with some lighter green on top of this just to see what happens. Everything I do, it's kind of an experiment. It's just kind of how I flow. I mean, I have, I have some idea about what I'm doing, but I just like to play and experiment and see what will happen. So that's what I'm doing right here in front of you. I'm using a palette knife. It's just a regular old plastic palette knife, but I'm just going to kind of try to get some foliage kind of shapes in there. I love this green. It's a Lucas green. And the name of it's kind of funny. It's chrome green light, but the Lucas paints all have German on them, so it's chrome grün hell. I guess hell means light, so, which seems really sort of counterintuitive, doesn't it? That didn't sound right to me. I'm trying to make my marks go in all different directions, because the tendency is to want to do this, but the foliage isn't all pointing in that direction. It's kind of going all over the place, because they're pots of flowers. They're geraniums basically, and then there's a begonia on the ground, so that you're kind of looking down and the foliage is going all different directions. So I gotta make sure I get some shapes going in all the directions by moving my. And when you start to get like some overlap, that's when the magic starts to happen, in terms of it's starting to look foliage-like. I'm going to, one thing I need to do, let me talk about perspective a little bit as I'm working on this. This is a tabletop here, and these plants back here are farther away. They're in the distance. So I have to remember that as I start to, move back this way with my leaf shapes. If my leaf shapes are the same size back here as they are here, it doesn't give you perspective. And now I'm not trying to make this look exactly like the photograph, but I want it to give that impression. So I'm just gonna go a little bit smaller when I get back here in this area, right? And I do that by just using the tip of the tool. Or you can use a smaller tool if you want to, or a different shape tool, just so that the foliage has a different size and shape to it. It's also a different plant, so they should look a little bit different. I mean, it's still a petunia, but it's a little bit different. Okay, so that's kind of the beginnings of the foliage for those pieces that are on the table there. And I'm feeling pretty excited about it. A little more going on down here, I think. Do some great big marks, since this is what's closest in the perspective. Yeah. I like that. That's good. Mary's asking about the greens. So this green that I shared earlier, it's Chrome Green Light from Lucas. And this is phthalo green. So Viridian, or in German, it's this weird, really weird name, but it's a phthalo. Like, it's kind of a blue-green. That's what it looks like. It's a really deep phthalo. So that's what I got going on there. I'm going to add, and I want to do more of that down here, because this particular plant is kind of, this one's down on the ground below the table, so it's a little bit darker. All right. It's getting there. All right. I'm kind of digging it. Let's see. And there's a ton of texture. Let me get close here. So I'm not going to fool anymore with that part that I've been working on. I don't know if you can see how much texture there is there, but there's a ton of texture to it. Like, the paint's on there, like, I smushed it on there nice and thick. Okay, I've got some really dark blue that I've added onto my palette, and I may regret it, but I'm going to use it down on this bottom plant. The nice thing about acrylics is regret only lasts until it dries, right? All right, get my reference image back up here again. Yeah. Again, I'm using a palette knife for this part. And I'm really just, you know, making strokes with the paint onto the canvas to get that illusion of the foliage. And you can see this is kind of mixing with that the phthalo green. Just to make it look a little bit darker. Now, and right next to that plant is another lighter colored plant right down here. So I'm going to kind of like, and it's got itty bitty leaves. So I'm just going to use the very, very tip of this knife and kind of tap the green on there. Make sure you carry it right off the edge of the canvas too. So I'm going to go in, I'll go in with some lighter greens over top of this dark blue. Not right now though, I'm going to let it sit and dry. Well, one thing I can do, this is kind of interesting, is some scraping. It's kind of just working with the texture of it. Then I'm going to go in with a green that's sort of in between, maybe more of an olive green. We'll go in here because that's, it's a different plant altogether. I think it's a begonia, and it's got that sort of olivey brown color that's right here. So I'm going to do that, and I'm not painting that hook. I'm not going to do that. But then so much of that will be hidden by this fuchsia of the flowers. So, you know, I think I'm getting somewhere with it. What do y'all think? Look, Amy can do something other than just straight up abstract, right? Mary wants me to talk about color, why you chose it for perspective, etc. Well, I started with the, I'm trying to layer the colors dark on the bottom and light over top, because when you look at the, when you look at the photograph, you can see, you know, the shadows underneath. You can see these upper layers of leaves, but you can see that the ones underneath, you know, they're the same color leaves, right? But they're in shadow. So the darker color goes underneath to kind of give you that shadow. So, you know, the light on top is the leaves that the sunlight is hitting, and the dark underneath is the darker leaves that are in shadow that are down inside the plant. It's mostly a light thing rather than a perspective thing. This one in the back is a little bit darker. I'll probably go in a little bit more in here with some of this navy blue, but I need to let this dry right now or I'm gonna wind up with mud. So I'm gonna probably go in here to differentiate a little bit with this with some darker, like this navy blue here. But I've got the, you know, the beginnings of what my foliage is going to look like there. Because if you, there's a plant back here, and there's a plant here, and there's a plant here. So I'm going to go in and differentiate that with some darker colors too. So it's more about light than perspective. The perspective is all about the size. So the smaller leaves here, because this is the background and this is the foreground. So these are the bigger leaves. So, but again, it's not realism. It is Impressionism, which is a form of abstraction, because it's taking the photograph and making it, it doesn't look exactly like it. So that's, Impressionism is a form of abstraction. Really almost all art is a form of abstraction unless you're a realist, and you're producing artwork that looks like a photograph. Pretty much all art is producing a impression of the thing. It's not the thing itself. And I am going to stop on this painting in the video for today, and I'll work on it later, and I'll share the results with you all later.